Now, the Economic Community of West African States has declared a state of emergency across the region. ECOWAS Commission President Ibrahim Traoré made the announcement on Tuesday at the 55th session of the Mediation and Security Council in Abuja, Nigeria. The meeting followed a wave of coups and attempted mutinies that have unsettled the sub-region in recent months. Traoré said the recent political upheavals underscores what he calls the urgent need for deep reflection on the future of democracy and increased investment in security across West Africa.
ECOWAS has just declared a state of emergency in West Africa, a move driven by the alarming rise of military coups across the region. In just a few years, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, and others have fallen into the hands of soldiers. For an organization built to protect democracy, this is more than a warning sign. It is proof that democratic stability in West Africa is under serious threat. But instead of only reacting to each coup, ECOWAS must confront a deeper truth. Why do these coups keep happening? Why are soldiers able to take power so easily? And why do so many ordinary civilians actually support them? In today's video, we explore the real story behind this crisis. We will walk through the major coups starting from Mali, examine how ECOWAS responded, and explain why it eventually declared a state of emergency. More importantly, we will look at the root causes driving these coups, the public frustration that fuels support for military takeovers, and the ways ECOWAS has failed to address these issues. Let's dive right in. The current wave of coups in West Africa did not appear out of nowhere. It began quietly in Mali. In 2020, Malian soldiers arrested the president and forced him to resign, claiming the government was corrupt. Insecurity was worsening, and ordinary people were suffering while leaders enjoyed power. Western countries condemned the coup immediately, but inside Mali, the reaction was completely different. Thousands celebrated in the streets. Years of frustration had boiled over, and many citizens saw the military as the only group willing to confront the chaos. Even today, despite Mali still facing major challenges, a large portion of the population continues to support the military leadership. After the first takeover, Colonel Assimi Goïta briefly allowed a return to civilian rule, but by 2021, he seized power again, overthrowing the transitional government and establishing a fully military-led state. Instead of resisting, many Malians embraced it. They believed the military was delivering what politicians had failed to provide for years: a sense of control, authority, and national pride. Mali became the first clear signal that the political mood in West Africa was changing, and that soldiers, not civilians, were beginning to regain the trust of the people. After Mali, the wave of military takeovers spread quickly. In 2021, soldiers in Guinea overthrew President Alpha Condé, accusing him of changing the constitution just to extend his rule. And once again, large crowds celebrated the coup. Chad followed a slightly different path. After President Idriss Déby was killed, the military seized power and installed his son, Mahamat Déby. Unlike other coups, this one was openly supported by France, which argued it was necessary to prevent the country from collapsing. But Mahamat Déby did what many others did not. He quickly transitioned back towards civilian rule within months, distancing Chad from the growing list of long-term military governments. Then came Burkina Faso. In early 2022, the military removed President Roch Kabore under the leadership of Colonel Damiba, but only months later, another faction within the military removed Damiba himself. That was when Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped in. Traoré claimed he never wanted to take power, but he accused Damiba of focusing on enriching himself instead of fixing the country's collapsing security. His takeover was condemned internationally, yet inside Burkina Faso, he became a symbol of hope. Traoré's charisma and strong anti-corruption message quickly won over millions, especially young Africans. His rise didn't just strengthen support for military rule. It reshaped the entire regional mood, making military governments more popular than many long-standing civilian ones. A few months later, in June 2023, the shockwave hit again, this time in Niger. The president was arrested by his own guards, and another military government took control. But unlike the earlier coups, this one triggered the biggest crisis ECOWAS had ever faced. Nigeria's newly elected president, who had just become the chairman of ECOWAS, wanted to show strength. Instead of relying on diplomacy, he issued a 7-day ultimatum: return to civilian rule or prepare to face military invasion. That threat changed everything. Almost immediately, Mali, Burkina Faso, and even Guinea announced their support for Niger's new military leaders. They warned that if ECOWAS or Nigeria attacked Niger, the entire region would face war. The backlash from civil society, combined with the terrifying possibility of a regional conflict, eventually forced ECOWAS to step back from its invasion plan. Within just 3 years, 4 major West African countries had fallen under military rule. And despite happening in different nations, the story behind each coup was the same: accusations of corruption, governments failing to protect citizens, rising poverty, and a complete collapse of public trust. That is how the domino effect began. One successful coup made the next seem possible, and each one chipped away at the foundations of democracy across the region. But how did ECOWAS respond to this wave of coups, and what impact did its actions really have? When the first coup struck Mali, ECOWAS moved quickly. The country was suspended from the regional bloc, borders were closed, economic sanctions were imposed, and Mali's access to regional funds was frozen. The goal was clear: pressure the soldiers until they returned power to civilians. But something unexpected happened. The sanctions didn't break the military government, they broke the people. Food prices soared, fuel became scarce, businesses collapsed. Yet the soldiers remained firmly in control, and instead of turning against the military, many Malians turned against ECOWAS. They began to see the organization not as a defender of democracy, but as a threat to their survival. Still, ECOWAS did not adjust its strategy. When Guinea had its coup, ECOWAS repeated the same playbook: condemn, suspend, sanction. When Burkina Faso fell, the same response followed again. By the time Niger was overthrown in 2023, ECOWAS had already lost significant credibility across the region. But Niger was the breaking point. In Nigeria's attempt to assert regional dominance, it shut its borders with Niger and cut off the country's electricity supply. The consequences were devastating. Hospitals struggled to keep equipment running. Patients could not receive life-saving treatment. Hundreds of people died. Trade collapsed. Tensions between Nigeria and Niger reached levels not seen in decades. And tragically, those tensions remain unresolved to this day. Beyond the suffering caused by sanctions, ECOWAS made another critical mistake. Its threat to launch a military intervention in Niger sent a powerful message, not just to Nigerians, but to the entire region. To many people, it felt as though ECOWAS was willing to turn its guns on the very populations it was created to protect, all because of bloodless coups driven by public frustration. That moment changed everything. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso decided they had seen enough. They withdrew from ECOWAS and created their own regional bloc, the Alliance of the Sahel States, AES. Their leaders accused ECOWAS of abandoning the original vision of its founding fathers and serving the interests of foreign powers rather than African citizens. And for many observers, those accusations were not without truth. Niger was extremely strategic to the West, especially to France and the United States. Both countries had military bases in Niger. In fact, the US operated its most expensive drone base in Agadez. For France, Niger was the source of the uranium that powered its nuclear energy. A military government that was not aligned with Western interests was unacceptable to them. This is why France and the US supported Nigeria's threat to invade Niger. But in the end, thanks to massive regional backlash and the risk of a continent-wide war, the plan collapsed before it even began. The moment ECOWAS showed it was willing to go to war against a fellow African country and on behalf of foreign powers, everything changed. To many Africans, it confirmed one painful belief: ECOWAS has lost its credibility. If a regional bloc can threaten war against its own people, then what exactly is its purpose? This is the question millions of West Africans are asking today. But here is the most surprising twist in this entire story. Instead of protesting against the coup leaders, many citizens are celebrating them. For decades, military coups in Africa were feared because they often produced dictators. Yet in the Sahel, the reaction has been completely different. When coups happen, crowds pour into the streets. People cheer, flags wave. Some even carry photos of the new military leaders as symbols of hope. So the question becomes unavoidable. Why are military takeovers gaining so much public support in West Africa? And the truth is, there are several powerful reasons behind this shift. The first reason is a deep and widespread frustration with civilian governments. Across West Africa, many people feel that democracy has failed them. Elections are often manipulated, votes are bought, violence disrupts polling stations. In reality, most elections in the region are neither free nor fair. And even when the right leaders are elected, very little changes. The economy remains weak, roads crumble, hospitals lack basic equipment, schools are broken, unemployment rises, and corruption spreads everywhere. Daily life becomes harder, and for many young people, the only dream left is to leave their country behind. So when soldiers overthrow these leaders, people don't mourn the fall of democracy. They feel relieved. They believe the system that failed them has finally been interrupted. The second major reason is insecurity and terrorism. For more than a decade, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have been devastated by violent extremist attacks. Entire villages were erased, civilians were massacred, and soldiers were killed in ambushes. Despite foreign troops being stationed in the region, the insecurity continued to grow. Civilian governments appeared powerless, unable to protect their own people. So when the military took over and promised to confront terrorism head-on, many citizens welcomed them. Not because they believed soldiers were perfect, but because they no longer trusted politicians who had failed repeatedly to keep them safe. The third reason is anger at foreign control. Many West Africans believe their countries are still being controlled from the outside, especially by France and other Western powers. They see foreign companies extracting gold, uranium, oil, and rare minerals while local communities remain deeply poor. So when military leaders speak about ending foreign influence, breaking old colonial-era agreements, and reclaiming national resources, people cheer. To them, it feels like taking back what belongs to them. The fourth reason is ECOWAS itself. To many citizens, the regional bloc looks selective and inconsistent. ECOWAS reacts quickly and aggressively when soldiers take power. But when civilian leaders steal public money, manipulate elections, change constitutions, or abuse power, ECOWAS says nothing. Nigeria's president, who once chaired ECOWAS, came into office through a widely disputed election, yet ECOWAS never questioned his legitimacy. And just weeks ago, the presidents of Togo, Ivory Coast, and Cameroon all amended their constitutions to extend their rule, essentially committing constitutional coups. Once again, ECOWAS remains silent. To ordinary people, this double standard proves that ECOWAS defends political elites, not democracy. So people are now asking hard questions. Where was ECOWAS when leaders were stealing public money? Where was ECOWAS when elections were rigged in broad daylight? Where was ECOWAS when terrorists were wiping out entire villages? Because of this silence, many citizens no longer see ECOWAS as a neutral defender of democracy. They see it as a club that protects politicians, not the people. The fifth reason behind the rise of coups is youth frustration. West Africa is one of the youngest regions in the world, yet millions of young people are unemployed. They feel ignored, abandoned, and excluded from the future of their own countries. So when a coup happens, it feels like a shakeup of a system that failed them. It feels like pressing a reset button. Whether this hope is realistic doesn't matter. Emotionally, people feel that something new, something different, finally has a chance to begin. And this is the dangerous truth ECOWAS is now facing. Coups are not spreading because people love military rule. They are spreading because people feel democracy has failed them. Now we arrive at the big question. ECOWAS has declared a state of emergency, but will that solve anything? ECOWAS says it is fighting to protect democracy, but many Africans are now asking something far more serious. Is ECOWAS truly fixing the problem, or is it making things worse? To answer this question, we need to look closely at how ECOWAS typically responds to coups. The pattern is always the same. The organization issues public condemnation, then immediately rolls out sanctions. Borders are shut, bank accounts are frozen, trade is blocked, flights are suspended. On paper, these measures are designed to pressure military leaders into giving up power. But in reality, they rarely hurt the generals. They hurt ordinary people. When economic sanctions hit, it is traders who lose their income. It is families who struggle as food prices rise. It is communities that suffer when fuel becomes scarce and small businesses collapse. Sanctions may inconvenience military rulers, but it is the masses who pay the real price. And that is why ECOWAS' strategy has failed repeatedly. Not a single military leader has restored civilian rule because of sanctions. Instead, The only clear outcome is that millions now see ECOWAS actions as collective punishment, aimed not at dictators, but at the people already suffering under them. The second way ECOWAS responds is through the threat of military action. We saw this most clearly in Niger. ECOWAS threatened to invade, troops were placed on standby, and for a moment, West Africa stood on the edge of a regional war. People across the continent were terrified. A war in Niger would never have remained inside Niger. It would have spilled into neighboring countries, destabilized borders, and created a flood of refugees. Worse, terrorist groups would have used the chaos to expand. Eventually, ECOWAS stepped back, but the damage was already done. The mere threat of invasion shattered trust. The third issue is double standards. Some presidents change constitutions to stay longer in power. Some manipulate elections. Others rule for decades with weak or no opposition. Yet ECOWAS often remains silent. But when soldiers take power, ECOWAS reacts instantly and aggressively. So people naturally ask, why is ECOWAS tough on military rulers but soft on bad civilian leaders? This contradiction destroys the organization's moral authority. The fourth problem is timing. ECOWAS often reacts after the damage is done. Coups do not appear from thin air. They grow out of years of corruption, insecurity, poverty, injustice, and failed leadership. But ECOWAS rarely steps in early to prevent these problems. It waits until the system has already collapsed. By then, it is simply too late. The fifth problem is the loss of public trust. In Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, huge crowds celebrated the coups. They waved flags. They praised the soldiers. This shocked ECOWAS, but it also revealed something deeper. Many citizens no longer trust their civilian leaders or the regional institutions meant to protect them. When people cheer for soldiers taking power, it means their faith in democracy has already broken. Now, ECOWAS has declared a state of emergency across the region, but many are asking, is this the real solution? Or should ECOWAS finally address the root causes behind these coups? Because here is the truth. You cannot save democracy with force alone. You cannot fix decades of corruption with sanctions. And you cannot defeat insecurity through politics alone. Until corruption, poverty, injustice, and failed leadership are truly addressed, coups will continue, no matter how many emergencies ECOWAS declares. What do you think about this growing crisis? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more insightful analyses.